The following is a special presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network. Wildfire, Mother Nature's fury.
We're experiencing some extreme conditions.
Creating a storm of flames.
It was pretty significant, pretty fascinating.
With Montana caught in the midst.
The fire is actually this whole back area on the other side of the tree line, which you can't see. It's freaky.
This summer, blazes across Big Sky country sent residents fleeing.
Am I going to see my house again?
I really got no place else to go. This is our home.
Strained the state's resources.
So we have shortages on crews, engines, aircraft.
And claimed the lives of two firefighting heroes.
This fire season has been really rough for everyone.
Now we're left to put out the final embers of a season some described as apocalyptic.
If they can't get some helicopters out here, they're not going to be able to get it under control.
And regroup.
I'm always impressed by Montana.
As neighbors and Montanans.
Neighbor helps neighbor. It's always been that way.
Tonight, the Montana Television Network looks back at these fires from one corner of the state to the next, from east to west, at all points in between, and rally support for those affected as we all move forward with Montana wildfire relief.
Good evening and thanks for joining us for this MTN special presentation. I'm Tim McGonigal.
And I'm Shannon Newth. We're coming to you tonight to ask for your help and to say thank you to those who have already given to the MTN Montana Wildfire Relief Fund.
The MTN Montana Wildfire Relief Fund is an effort to help those impacted most by the 2017 wildfire season. From the volunteer fire departments who race toward the flames to the community organizations who help families rebuild.
Now, this fund is a partnership between the Montana Television Network and the Montana Community Foundation. MTN's Jacob Fewer introduces us to the Montana Community Foundation and several of the generous donors who have already shown their support.
The Montana Community Foundation has been fundraising for nearly 30 years.
The volume has far exceeded what I anticipated.
Mary Rutherford, President and Chief Executive, says the overwhelming support for the MTN Montana Wildfire Relief Fund has been incredible.
It's been shocking and surprising. You know, we've received donations from individuals and businesses all over the state of Montana, every corner covered.
Hundreds of people have contributed to the fund, and a thick stack of thank you notes sits ready to be mailed to donors. Among the recipients, everyday citizens and some big names, including a $50,000 match from MTN's parent company Cordillera Communications and another $50,000 match from the Mountain Sky Guest Ranch Fund and Arthur M. Blank Foundation.
I think this is a great way to listen to the needs in the community that are timely and critical.
The Montana Shirt Company from Whitefish donated $25,000.
We really wanted to make sure that the money that we donated stayed within Montana.
Pure West Christie's International Real Estate in Bozeman is also matching $10,000. It's a community effort that's paying off.
The fact that people are moved enough to make a contribution to help their fellow Montanans makes a difference.
Jacob Fewer, MTN News.
The 2017 wildfire season has been one of the most devastating on record, but that wasn't what was predicted. KRTV Chief Meteorologist Mike Rowlands looks back to explain what happened.
Historic flooding and record snow in fall and winter gave Montanans a false sense of security when it came to the approaching fire season. Lots of snow fell across the state, and then we dried out. It was one of the worst spring and summer seasons on record for Glasgow, Montana, officially the driest year and summer on record. And that led to a devastating drought that started in the east and spread west. This was May 18th when we had virtually no drought across Montana. Watch week after week as the drought spread from east to west here, becoming severe, extreme, and exceptional. And that drought continued to spread west as we went through the summer months. Here's what happened. Well, typically, as we go from winter to summer, we see changes in the jet stream. This is the typical jet stream position during winter. The jet stream, or polar jet, is right on top of Montana, allowing very cold air to dive south and allowing, of course, lots of snow to fall in the mountains. Typically, as we make that transition into summer, though, the jet stream moves farther north, and that allows some hotter, drier air to bubble up here into the Treasure State. Here's what went wrong. This summer, a massive area of high pressure, what we call a blocking high, developed across the west and stayed in place for weeks on end, delivering one of the driest summers on record across the Treasure State, virtually drying everything out and leading to one of the worst fire seasons in memory.
With the help of the Montana Community Foundation and hundreds of donors, we surpassed our initial goal of $50,000. MTN parent company Cordillera Communication generously matched the first $50,000.
But there is more work to do, and here is how you can help.
I'm afraid our ranch is going to burn. I sure hope I don't, but it's coming.
If you weren't here, my house would have burned down.
Over the reef over there, and you could see it in the dark, you know, you could really see the flames. Because we knew the fire was coming, but we didn't know how fast.
Today the wind was blowing out of the east a little bit, which helped us. If it was blowing like it was yesterday, we'd be burned out right now.
How do you replace it all? How do you go through and make a list of everything that you did lose?
Within probably a matter of a half an hour, it was a pretty significant, pretty fascinating situation.
But I am thankful as hell that they're here to save my house and to save my friends' houses over here.
Your appreciation is very heartfelt.
Neighbor helps neighbor. It's always been that way, and hopefully it stays that way.
The way folks help each other out, I'm always impressed by Montana.
It was an unrelenting summer of wildfires in western Montana. It was a summer of evacuations, lost tourism, hazardous air quality, and 2 lives lost fighting western Montana fires.
We start tonight in western Montana with MTN's Jill Valley and Dennis Bragg.
It's a summer most of us will not soon forget. Dozens of wildfires across western Montana burning for months that at times felt like they were never going to end.
The fires claimed the lives of 2 firefighters. The smoke put a chokehold on communities across western Montana. It hurt the small town economies that thrive on summer business, and it destroyed one of Glacier Park's iconic chalets.
It is easy to add up what we lost this summer: the trees and rangeland, homes, clean air. Fire took all that away and then some. But let us not forget what was really lost this summer: 2 firefighters who paid the ultimate price to keep us safe. One, so young, working on just the second wildfire of his career. The other, an elite, experienced hotshot with a family legacy of firefighting. But both would die in Montana, killed by falling trees while fighting fire. 19-year-old Trenton Johnson recently graduated from Hellgate High School in Missoula. He was a member of the state champion lacrosse team. He enrolled at Montana State University, working towards a degree in engineering. You had to be on your toes to keep up with this kid.
He had an awesome sense of humor. Witty, like he was 3 steps ahead of the conversation, and he would come up with just snappy, witty statements.
Trenton followed in his big sister's footsteps to become a summer wildland firefighter, and he was excited when he got that first call to fight a fire in Utah.
He likes to work hard, he likes to be outdoors, so it was a really good fit for him, and he loved it. He was on the Bryan Head fire for 2 weeks in Utah, and he called me every single day and let me know how he was doing, like what he was doing. He absolutely loved working hard.
Then he was assigned to a fire burning near Seeley Lake, a small lightning-started fire that would eventually become part of the Rice Ridge Fire. But on July 19th, suddenly, a tree fell and hit him. He died at the hospital.
Some of the wording I heard was fast as a lightning bolt, and he just heard a crack, and that was it. The three of them were able to get out of the way, and Trenton did not.
2 weeks later, it happened again. 29-year-old Brent Witham of California died August 2nd in the early days of the Lolo Peak fire. A tree fell and hit him while working on a fire line in the McLean Creek area. Brent is a member of the Vista Grande Hotshots stationed in San Bernardino, California. He left Montana a hero. He returned home as one to hundreds of fellow firefighters who paid their respects.
It's very emotional to see a fallen fire brother come out of the plane, and I feel pain as if it was my own brother.
Montana Governor Steve Bullock ordered flags in Montana flown half-staff in honor of Trenton and Brent and all other wildland firefighters lost in the line of duty. Montana's congressional leaders praised their bravery, saying Trenton and Brent's sacrifice will not be forgotten. Neither will this fire season. It was a tough one.
Why did this happen again? Especially so local and so close to all of us. It just, yeah, it's been a rough summer for firefighters all around.
We just ask that you keep the family and in your prayers, and the fellow workers, and all the firefighters that are out there right now on the line.
Trenton would have turned 20 years old last week. His sister tells us the firefighting community has been there for her family during this tragedy.
Although the Seeley Lake community was hit harder than most, struggling through weeks of record-breaking smoke and half the town being evacuated, Seeley Lake residents are pulling together, and they're looking forward to a future without fire. A summer of smoke and fire smothered the lucrative tourism season in Seeley Lake, but the fires weren't the only problem.
The news media did not exactly understand that Seeley Lake closure was the lake closure, and so people thought the whole town was closed.
Letting others know the town hadn't burned down from the 160,000-acre Rice Ridge fire wasn't the only challenge. With more than half the town under evacuation orders, it was tough even staffing a business.
There was a little bit of a confusion with people trying to go to work and not having enough people, and how did you get people to come to work, and communication, and the whole thing was a little bit on the challenging side. When nearly, we figured that somewhere around between 80 and 85% of town were either evacuated or on evacuation notice.
Now that the clouds and rain have replaced the fire smoke, this resilient community is getting back to the business at hand, taking care of each other and planning for future promotion of Seeley Lake. In fact, work is underway for a weekend fundraiser, helping the family of a 3-year-old girl coping with an inoperable brainstem tumor in Seattle's Children's Hospital.
What I call a PTA-style carnival that was scheduled for Labor Day Sunday, and obviously we all went to evacuation mode. You cannot hold a fundraiser when there's nobody left in town. So we postponed it. We did not cancel it. We postponed it, and we are going to hold it this Sunday instead.
And that's so typical of Seeley, able to focus not on the hardships, but on the blessings of living in this legendary corner of Montana, where the fun goes on from season to season, decade to decade. A place where boating may be winding down, but skiing and free ice skating are just around the corner. The trick now is just reminding the rest of Montana.
That is true. I think that the Chamber of Commerce is going to hunker down and see what they can do to make it a very successful winter.
In Seeley Lake, Dennis Bragg, MTN News.
I'm Nicole Miller in Glacier National Park.
This is actually where you see really the bear grass in the front of the chalet.
They say every picture is worth 1,000 words.
We try to go every year to Sperry Chalet. It's difficult to get a night, and 5 weeks ago we had 2 nights scheduled.
2 nights that landscape photographer Brett Buddha had no way of knowing would be his last ones.
I've been there probably 5 to 7 times.
Since 2004, Buddha has been capturing the park, but he says this year the rich, blooming bear grass captured him.
This year was a very unique. The richness of the bear grass was really unimaginable.
Buddha spent hours shooting the rustic lodge from every angle enshrouded in bear grass, capturing this photo, not knowing just weeks later the historical landmark and architectural treasure would burn in the Sprague fire.
We had a strong westerly wind that gave the fire enough oxygen and pushed it in an uncontrollable manner. There was no way of stopping that fire. It run up through that drainage, the Sperry drainage, and of course the ember showers and everything that came from that compromised the chalet.
An independent investigation into the disaster was launched by Interior Secretary Zinke, who also announced rebuilding the Sperry Chalet is one of his top priorities. For Buddha, the moment he captured this photo will be how he forever remembers the last time he saw the Sperry Chalet.
I spent 2 hours actually walking around the chalet from different spots and taking different shots of the chalet just in case ever we need them. I mean, it's just how odd it is. So it was very fortunate, and I would almost call it divine. It was meant to be.
Reporting from Glacier National Park, Nicole Miller, MTN News.
I'm afraid our ranch is going to burn. I sure hope I don't, but it's coming.
If you weren't here, my house would have burned down.
Over the reef over there, and you could see it in the dark, you know, you could really see the flames. Because we knew the fire was coming, but we didn't know how fast.
Today the wind was blowing out of the east a little bit, which helped us. If it was blowing like it was yesterday, we'd be burned out right now.
How do you replace it all? How do you go through and make a list of everything that you did lose?
Within probably a matter of a half an hour, it was a pretty significant, pretty fascinating situation.
But I am thankful as hell that they're here to save my house and to save my friends' houses over here.
Your appreciation is very heartfelt.
Neighbor helps neighbor. It's always been that way, and hopefully it stays that way.
The way folks help each other out, it's just, I'm always impressed by Montana.
Volunteer firefighters can play a critical role in every part of firefighting, from initial attack to holding fire lines.
MTN's Dennis Carlson has more on the valuable role these firefighters play in protecting communities.
When fire breaks out in Montana, it's usually family, neighbors, or co-workers who are the first to respond. According to the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, more than 90% of fire departments in Montana are volunteer-run. A group of firefighters shared with KTVH's Mackenzie Frost their story of protecting lives and property during one of the most dangerous fire days this past summer. And Keely Van Middendorp looks at the critical need in Montana for more volunteer firefighters.
It was 7 o'clock in the evening.
Nothing about this fire makes sense.
Saturday, September 2nd.
Jacksonville Fire, Canyon Creek Fire, Dearborn, East Valley, Fire Coordinator, West Valley, Lewis and Clark.
Wolf Creek 877 is requesting first alarm wildfire for Alice Creek. Have them staged as they did before on Highway 200 at the DOT yard. First alarm, Alice Creek Fire from Wolf Creek.
Volunteers from fire departments all across central Montana raced to respond to the Alice Creek fire near Rounders Pass.
Fighting fire at night's dangerous.
Days after that first alarm call, Wally Jester, chief of Lewis and Clark Volunteer Fire, paints a vivid picture of that night.
And the fire was all over those mountains. I mean, it was rocking.
He and his crew of volunteers watched as the flames crept closer.
The fire's all along the fence, and you can see the ring of fire goes out around, clear on the far side as far as it goes into the smoke and disappears.
These firefighters didn't know what they were getting involved in.
No precipitation this weekend. Really, Saturday will be dry and a little smoky, breezy, red flag warning conditions.
That weekend, the fire grew nearly 10,000 acres.
I've been doing this for 22 years, and it still scares you. If you're not scared, you shouldn't be out here.
With mountains surrounding the fire, ranches and homes dotting the perimeter, Dave Sammons, chief of East Valley Volunteer Fire, recalls the task at hand.
Our objective was to secure this line and then on the other side of the ridge, secure a line so it didn't get into another house over there.
Then the night changed.
We got a call from command to bring Strike Team 2 back over to the maintenance shed down here, the section house. It was being threatened.
The Department of Transportation shed housed a potential threat. 2 1,000-gallon propane tanks. 12 hours after that first call to respond,
all of a sudden it kind of started to light up on the horizon behind, over there, and I thought, well, it's sunrise, and I watched it a little farther and it just started, the glow come. You knew that's not the sunrise, it's coming.
When these firefighters got here and they saw the fire burning up over this ridge, they realized this was the last opportunity they had to stop the fire from taking these buildings and then hopping Highway 200.
Keeping the Alice Creek fire on the north side of the highway was crucial.
If it gets over there, we can't get to it. It'll be a helicopter show only. It's a dangerous situation. And
whipping winds plagued the firefighters all night, but when that died down, these volunteers seized their small window of opportunity.
We punched into it, anchored into the black, and just went to work.
And I'll bet you that attack didn't take 20, 25 minutes. And all 4 trucks were back down here. We watered them down. We got ready for our next assignment.
A swift change in the wind.
It was immediate. It happened so fast.
Changed the course of the fire.
And if we wouldn't have stopped it here, we would be chasing it that way. It was awesome timing. Everything worked out in our favor that night. So.
And everyone was exhausted.
36 hours up at one time before I finally went home.
I don't think a lot of people understand it's all volunteer.
Standing in the scar, they relive a critical night.
It just gives you that little empty feeling in your stomach that, you know, we got good equipment, good people, but there's still that risk that goes with it.
Despite staying awake for a day and putting themselves in danger, these volunteers would do it all again.
When you make a difference in somebody's life, you can go to bed at night and go, that's pretty cool what we did today. I got a good crew. We made a difference.
I'm Keely Van Middendorp in Great Falls. The Montana State Fire Chiefs Association says more than 90% of the state's fire departments depend on volunteers, who are usually the first line of defense in any fire. Even before this explosive fire season, officials say they were facing recruitment issues.
We'll take whatever you'll give us. even if I can only get 4 hours a month from you, 2 hours a month from you, I'll take whatever you'll give me. And if I have enough of that, I'll have a fire department.
The Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation said last February that one reason rural departments are in a crisis is because employers are less tolerant of volunteers responding to calls during the daytime hours.
We've had volunteers tell us that I can't respond during the day. My boss won't let me. If I came back from a fire, I would not have a job.
But fire officials say that's when most emergencies occur.
You know, usually late afternoon, especially during the summertime, when the wildland season comes around.
Along with having enough volunteers to respond to emergencies in their jurisdiction, fire departments also respond to mutual aid calls in other counties. They say the timing of a fire can make or break a station's mutual aid response.
If it happens in the middle of the week, everybody's working, and we don't have very many volunteers, we can't make much of a response out of the county. If it happens on a weekend, we happen to have a lot of volunteers available, then we can make a commitment. to a neighboring fire department and help them out.
Several volunteer departments in Cascade County, including Manchester and Sand Coulee, responded to mutual aid calls for the Alice Creek and East Fork fires. They say volunteer efforts were key in protecting structures at risk.
There were no other paid resources on that, in that section of the fire when that thing came out. Had it not been for volunteer fire departments, the outcome would have been substantially different.
In Great Falls, Keely Van Middendorp, MTN News.
Volunteer fire crews rushed to fight the East Fork fire south of Havre when it broke out on August 27th. Thousands of acres and several cabins were burned as the fire spread.
And I was actually at a friend's cabin in the Bear's Paw on that day. I remember thinking as I walked through a field just how incredibly dry, crunchy that grass was. It felt like if I scuffed my shoe, it would ignite a flame there. As we were on the way out of the mountains, we saw many volunteer crews rushing in.
And those volunteer crews were not alone on the East Fork fire.
Hundreds came out, neighbor helping neighbor, doing what Montanans do. As rain falls in the Bear's Paw Mountains,
it's a huge relief.
3 men survey the damage done by the East Fork fire.
Yeah, we were roaming back up in here.
Coulter Bickford, Cody Peterson, and Joel Ostrom represent 3 of the hundreds of humble civilian firefighters, those who sacrifice time, energy, and resources simply because that's what Montanans do.
Heard there was a fire and came to it, and it's just what you do, I guess, when you live in these small communities. You go help everybody out.
They gave up sleep, and a lot of it, to work around the clock, and even those dark, middle-of-the-night hours when orange flames were all that lit up the horizon.
8 days for 24 hours a day.
8 straight days. Worked all night, slept an hour, went back to work all day.
One night I even cuddled up underneath the fire truck just to get a couple of minutes of shut-eye.
I was wore out, but the adrenaline kept you going. I mean, you wanted to be out there helping as much as you could.
The East Fork fire ignited deep in the Bear's Paw Mountains on the afternoon of Sunday, August 27th, quickly spreading and eventually charring nearly 22,000 acres.
There was a lot of miles of fence that was totally destroyed in the fire, so maintaining cattle where they belong is about impossible right now.
A lot of people lost haystacks and a lot of hay meadows or grazing land.
Civilian firefighters made their own firefighting apparatuses, utilizing whatever was available in suppression efforts.
Picked up a chemical tote from a family friend, rinsed it out, loaded it up in the back of the pickup, and filled it with water, got a 2-inch pump and a 2-inch firefighting hose and nozzle.
Fighting more than just the overwhelming flames, but also the intricacies that go along with a blaze burning in grass and timber.
Sometimes you're going back to areas that you just put out because it'd flare up right away.
A bond brought together those who helped in a way unique to this firefighting effort.
You might not have known the person standing next to you fighting fire, but by the end of the week you did.
Even if you didn't get along, you were best friends out there fighting fire.
Mutual support simply for the love of community.
The community support was phenomenal. We couldn't have done it without all of the support that we got.
South of Havre, Shannon Newth, MTN News.
Now, we've heard many stories this year about fighting fires, but the fight can begin long before a fire starts. Proper mitigation on your property is your best line of defense.
We live in the state of Montana. It's not a question of if we're going to get a fire. It's a question of when.
A solid wall of trees is not a healthy plant community.
Matt Daw is in the middle of a 4 to 8 year fuel mitigation project on his 160-acre ranch north of York.
You can't see more than 25 yards in here, and this was the mess that was left over from when the beetle kill came through here over like the last 7 years. And if a fire were to come through here, it would be gone. You couldn't, like I said,
all those little whips you've taken out.
Right, you couldn't see any of it.
Working in consultation with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, Daw is removing dead and dying timber from his property and eliminating ladder fuels that can turn a grass fire into a crown fire.
When we take these ladder fuels, when we trim down from as high up as we can reach down to the ground, and we get these junipers out, what's going to happen is the fire will come through here, it's going to burn the grass, it's going to burn the needle cast out of here, and it's going to continue past. It might scorch the bottom of the tree a little bit, but the odds of it going up that tree and getting into the upper fuels of that tree are very, very slim.
We've been trimming trees. We have We needed all the ground that's not grazed, anything that, we've been working on it prior to the fire actually.
And the Nickerson family continues to work even as the Alice Creek fire bears down on their ranch.
We've gotten rid of every kind of fuel that we possibly can. We've got chainsaws ready. We'll chop any tree we've got to get it to the ground.
That right there, if a fire comes through here, it's just going to burn everything underneath and it's not going to get into the trees.
And as for Daw, as a volunteer firefighter, he feels good about the work he's done.
I feel very confident that if a fire were to come through here, we would minimize the damages to our property. And we wouldn't sustain any structural loss or anything of that.
Tim McGonigal, MTN News.
I'm afraid our ranch is going to burn. I sure hope I don't, but it's coming.
If you weren't here, my house would have burned down.
Over the reef over there, and you could see it in the dark. You could really see the flames. Because we knew the fire was coming, but we didn't know how fast.
Today the wind was blowing out of the east a little bit, which helped us. If it was blowing like it was yesterday, we'd be burned out right now.
Within probably a matter of a half an hour. It was a pretty significant, pretty fast-moving situation.
But I am thankful as hell that they're here to save my house and to save my friends' houses over here.
Your appreciation is very heartfelt.
Neighbor helps neighbor. It's always been that way. Hopefully it stays that way.
The way folks help each other out, I'm always impressed by Montana.
We now return to Montana wildfire relief.
So where do we go from here? Well, we're looking ahead to winter and some relief from the drier than usual conditions. And we look out into the Pacific, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or what we call ENSO. Now, typically, the trade winds from east to west blow across the Pacific, carrying warm water here from east to west. Behind it, colder water comes to the surface. We call that upwelling. Now, in an El Nino pattern, the trade winds weaken and begin blowing in reverse from west to east. That carries that warmer than usual water all the way back across the Pacific, and this impacts our weather right here in the United States. There's another pattern, though, La Nina. That's when the trade winds are stronger than usual, carrying that warm water well to the west and allowing for lots of upwelling, colder than usual water coming to the surface. That can impact winter here at home. We see a large area of high pressure develop here out over the Gulf of Alaska. And the Pacific jet, along with the polar jet, get aimed right at Montana, allowing for very cold air to move in and typically wetter than usual conditions. So here's what we expect. ENSO neutral conditions are likely to continue into early winter, leaving us mainly dry and warmer than usual. But it does appear that we're going to be trending toward La Nina conditions in mid to late winter, and that is favorable for heavy snow, colder temperatures later on in the season, which could ultimately help Montana.
Well, the largest wildfire of the season erupted on July 19th, a rangeland fire that roared out of control in east central Montana.
MTN's Janelle Slade and Jay Cohn report from Billings on the Lodgepole Complex.
The Lodgepole Complex fires took off through grassland and sagebrush, fueled by gusty winds. Before it was brought under control, over 270,000 acres had burned 16 homes were destroyed.
The fire would consume valuable pasture land, fencing, and haystacks. Power was lost to hundreds of rural electric customers. Reporter Dustin Kleeman and photographer Paul Humphrey provided our first look at the charred landscape.
Large swaths of land and buildings torched by the two large fires that make up the lodgepole complex.
The wind has absolutely been a major factor with this fire. It's pushed it every direction so far.
South of the fire activity, cattle could be seen along Highway 200 as barriers were broken and burned. Fire officials say a significant amount of cattle feed has been destroyed. It's unknown how many cattle have been killed, but many ranchers do not know the location of their cattle. The fire damaged about 45 power poles throughout the area, and crews worked on repairs Monday. More personnel arrived on scene from 34 states, including hotshot crews, to hit the front lines.
Speaking with fire officials, the big part of all this has been the help of the locals who have played a significant role in battling this blaze.
They've got extraordinary initial attack capabilities. This fire started as 11 fires and they caught most of them. And a lot of that was with local resources. And so, you know, just the way folks help each other out is just, I'm always impressed by Montana.
With aggressive fire behavior, officials were optimistic the weather could hold throughout the day, but overnight could be a different story.
It was soon evident the fire was going to have a major impact on the farm and ranch industry in Garfield and Petroleum counties.
Montana Ag reporter Russell Nimitz and photographer Paul Humphrey were able to capture the long road ahead for one rancher.
No humidity, 100+ degree heat, and just steady winds. And with the extreme drought conditions it was just a recipe for an uncontrolled disaster.
Even though the flames are out, like others, Jordan rancher Brett Daly is now facing the daunting task of putting his ranch back together after the fire burned miles and miles of fence line and also displaced thousands of cattle throughout Garfield and Petroleum counties.
Displacement of cattle would be somewhere directly affected, encompassing this fire area, would be somewhere around that 7,500 to right close to 10,000 head.
The other main priority now is rebuilding all that fence that was lost in the fire.
You know, there's a couple 100,000 acres right behind me there, and you can bet that 90% of the fence is burned up.
As neighbors continue to help neighbors recover, the generosity from other people, both near and far, is also nothing short of amazing.
Yes, generosity is unbelievable with people wanting to help out with this fire. Ranchers from away from here and you know, concerned people from the land that, you know, they knew those cattle were going to need feed. There was trucks loaded with hay headed this way, and most everybody was still out stomping on fire on the fire line.
And even through a huge natural disaster like this, the optimistic nature of those involved in agriculture continues to shine through all the ashes.
Mother Nature will be good to us again, and this country will green up and it'll look great again.
The lodgepole fire burned for weeks. Ranchers had to scramble to get their herds fed and back together.
They needed miles of fence repaired. When the call went out for help, Montanans answered. MTN's David J. spent a day on the fence line in Garfield County.
Volunteers replaced burned, damaged, and destroyed fencing for the Petersons on their ranch near Mosby in Garfield County.
When you have people by this numbers come to help you, it's awesome.
It's amazing. They come from everywhere and just to help us out. So it's a great thing.
And the Petersons have a lot of fencing to replace on the exterior of their property.
I'm 76 years old last February, and I told my wife I would probably never see this place fenced in what's left of my life. Now, maybe I will.
The fire burned more than 270,000 acres and came close to the Petersons' home. But the fire destroyed Larry's childhood home, which the Petersons' daughter was restoring.
This fire was a little bit overwhelming. I've never seen such a fire before.
They have about 22 miles of fencing to replace. Some of it that got burned is similar to this, and this is some of the original cedar that was put in by Larry and his family.
This was actually the sad part for him to see, because his grandfather and uncles and his dad and himself they put up most of these fences.
The Breakfast Flakes, with the help of people making donations, celebrated the day of installing fences with about 200 volunteers.
Everybody that's here today is here because they want to do something nice. They want to do something neighborly. They've been in a situation where they've had loss and somebody's helped them out. This is really a feel-good event, and people are just helping because they want to help.
There's a lot of people that have been devastated by this fire, and Montanans help each other out in times of need, so figured we'd come up, pitch in, and do our part.
I'm not sure when I'll be able to write all these thank you cards, but I would like to put it out to everybody and to all the firefighters and all the people who worked on them fires. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Now, the conditions around Billings have been ripe for wildfire for at least 2 months now. Several fires sparked but were put out quickly. This fire in Emerald Hills, just south of Billings, had the potential to run, but quick work through the air kept this fire at bay. And it was again the air attack and firefighter response that put down the Highway 87 fire in late August.
The Billings Airport remains a busy place, with the air tanker base playing a crucial role in fighting fires from above. I'm Janelle Slade.
And I'm Jay Cohn, MTN News.
I'm afraid our ranch is going to burn. I sure hope I don't, but it's coming.
If you weren't here, my house would have burned down.
Over the reef over there, and you could see it in the dark, you know, you could really see the flames. Because we knew the fire was coming, but we didn't know how fast.
Today the wind was blowing out of the east a little bit, which helped us. If it was blowing like it was yesterday, we'd be burned out right now.
How do you replace it all? How do you go through and make a list of everything that you did lose?
Within probably a matter of a half an hour. It was a pretty significant, pretty fascinating situation.
But I am thankful as hell that they're here to save my house and to save my friends' houses over here.
Your appreciation is very heartfelt.
Neighbor helps neighbor. It's always been that way, and hopefully it stays that way.
The way folks help each other out, it's just, I'm always impressed by Montana.
We now return to Montana wildfire relief.
During this year's fire season, southwest Montana fared better than most other parts of the state.
MTN's Donna Kelly joins us from Bozeman with a look at the aftermath of one big fire that did ignite in that region.
The largest wildfire in southwest Montana this season was the Myers Fire south of Phillipsburg. It scorched more than 62,000 acres and forced evacuations. But September snow and rain knocked the fire down and has nearly put it out. MTN's John Amy walked the charred forest left behind by the fire and talked to those who fought the blaze.
You hear that?
That dull, distant crack was the sound of a fire-damaged tree toppling over. And while recent rains and snow tamped out much of the wildfire burning south of Phillipsburg, the hazards of falling trees and unstable ground continue to make this charred forest a dangerous place.
Those dangers will exist for a while, not just this fall, but you know, the snags will always be there until they finally fall to the ground.
Hunters and outdoor enthusiasts are warned to be cautious when they return to these woods.
You can still have things come loose with additional moisture, trees falling, rocks rolling.
Since lightning first started this fire in mid-July, it was a difficult one to fight. crews used a defensive strategy to save structures around Moose Lake that were threatened by the fast-moving flames.
We had limited resources and extreme fire behavior with extreme drought conditions.
So I'm standing here in a fire-blackened wilderness near Moose Lake, and this is a spot where firefighters literally diverted this fire around a structure. In fact, the flames came within yards of the cabin.
Set up pumps and sprinkler systems and get the elevated moisture up and around the cabins. The whole idea is for the fire to move around the structure, leaving the structure safe.
And the plan worked because no structures were lost. South of Phillipsburg, John Amy, MTN News.
The duration, the intensity.
We're in a very serious situation here. We are tired of being told that others know better than we do while we watch our forests burn every summer.
But it's not sustainable to run a fire like this on donations.
I'm John Shearer in Livingston. Loggers and timber producers in Montana say they can do a lot to decrease the number and intensity of wildfires in the state. How would they do that? They say by thinning dangerously overgrown forests. They say activity like this could create a lot of jobs and make the state safer.
If you look at the fire triangle, it takes weather, topography, and fuels. And there's only one thing that humans can control, and that is fuels.
Some say overgrown forests are now a danger to the firefighters themselves.
I'm hearing from a lot of fire chiefs anymore that they're not going to risk the lives of their firefighters, the majority of them volunteer.
It's 22.5 million acres of national forest lands in Montana. We want to treat roughly 5 million acres.
We are trying to engineer, trying to actually construct a forest that's fireproof. It's ridiculous. It isn't going to work.
I've seen it happen. It works, and it saves lives, and it saves clean water and clean air.
If you clear cut the forest, which we are still having thousands of acres a year clear cut, all bets are off. You've got nothing left of the forest.
Both Senators Tester and Daines also want something else changed. They say instead of having the Forest Service pay for firefighting out of its annual budget, wildfires should be treated like any other natural disaster and funded through FEMA. In Livingston, John Shearer, MTN News.
MTN's Jill Valley spoke with Governor Steve Bullock on how the state recovers from such a catastrophic wildfire season.
It's been a historic year for wildfires across the state. How specifically has your office and the state met the challenges that we faced this summer?
Every single morning I have a fire briefing where we bring a lot of the key folks to say both where are the challenges and what more can we provide. So in some respects that's been everything from speaking directly to the FEMA director about ways to get resources in, to mobilizing the National Guard, not just for the air attacks, not just for safety, safety and security, but we actually have Guard soldiers fighting fires, to doing everything that we can to both coordinate the resources and remind people about in this historic season, firefighter safety, which is one of the things we all have to emphasize.
How are we going to be able to pay for what it costs to put these fires out?
This will be the most expensive fire season we've ever had in the state of Montana. The one thing that I said from the beginning is we are never going to sacrifice either firefighter safety or the fighting of fires based on the budget. So right now we've spent a little bit over $57 million of state dollars. My assurance is that, and I expect that our legislators and everybody else, after the fire season, we'll figure out how to pay any remainders. If that takes a special session, if that takes additional things, but we can't, especially with over 1 million acres burned so far, communities threatened. The finances can't be the issue that we're talking about. What we need to be talking about is how to aggressively fight these fires.
Let's talk about that. Would that be an unusual move to call a special session to pay the bills for the fires?
Yeah, it's something that used to happen in the past, but it's interesting because at the start of the fire season, we gather sort of all the agencies together. And it actually happened this year in Missoula. and federal, state, tribal, and they said, you know, this year certainly we have drought in eastern Montana, but west, after our rainstorms, after all the moisture over the winter, we expect a real light fire season. Well, then we had probably the longest period of drought in Missoula County alone, as an example, since the 1890s. So we did spend a lot more than anticipated. And what we do to finance that right now is take some emergency funds, borrow from the next year for Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. But we'll get that taken care of. I mean, because that can't be when we have over 5,000 firefighters out even today, structures threatened, so many issues out there. It can't be about, can we afford it? Heck yeah, we can afford it.
All right, so one big topic that comes up as people start to really think about these fires is forest management. A lot of people say, you know, if we were logging more, if we were thinning more, if we were able to have these projects begun and completed without the lawsuits that happen, we wouldn't have these catastrophic fires. What's your position on that? Do we need to get out there and log more?
Well, I think here's the first thing that we could actually do. If you go back to 1995, right? 16% of the Forest Service's budget was spent on fires. Now it's over 60%. There's 40% less staff on the Forest Service side now working in the woods, essentially to take care of this. I was, until last year, the chairman of the Western Governors Association. Democratic and Republican governors all agree that ending this practice of fire borrowing, so making sure that the Forest Service has resources to actually work in the woods, not just deal with fighting fires, would be a significant step. We do need to be doing work in the woods. Now, don't kid yourself that when you have like the longest period of prolonged drought that we've seen since, in some areas, in literally a century, when you have our seasons are getting hotter and hotter, there's no way you're going to get rid of fire. And anybody that suggests that the 1 million acres that were burned this year would have been, everything would have been great if we just did a little bit more work in the woods. I mean, I think that they're unfortunately using fires for political purposes as opposed to the recognition that we ought to end fire borrowing. We need to be working in the woods. We also need to be safeguarding individual homes, you know, making them fire safe, because a lot of this money also gets spent in the wildland-urban interface.
Should we log a little bit more?
I want to see logs on trucks. I want to keep that mill infrastructure alive. And also, when you do that work, you're going to not only be giving Montanans good jobs, but also taking care of watersheds and taking care of the forest that much better.
We talked about this a little bit. There was some frustration, they just felt left out of the conversation on the national level, that we were on fire while other states were dealing with their own natural disasters. You mentioned it's almost important for the rest of the country to acknowledge what it is we're going through.
Yeah, first I think it's a little hard for people outside of Montana to understand scale. When I was trying to get some federal grants from FEMA on the lodgepole fire, I finally said, put it in context. On the one hand, you might not think that there's that many people being impacted, but the size of this one fire is 6 District of Columbia's all together and all on fire. And I think that it is important that, I mean, my heart's gone out to folks in Houston and the South because of the hurricanes, but we're a state of 147,000 square miles. Dang near every corner and part of this state with the major fires have been impacted. Montana has spent most of this summer with the #1 priorities in the nation. I think that I look as governor, I'd always hope and want more out of Washington, D.C. I think they've heard us of the overall concerns, and I think that we need to work with them to figure out how to work better both on the funding and how we deal with these fires.
I'm afraid our ranch is going to burn. I sure hope I don't, but it's coming.
If you weren't here, my house would have burned down.
Over the reef over there, and you could see it in the dark, you know, you could really see the flames. because we knew the fire was coming, but we didn't know how fast.
Today the wind was blowing out of the east a little bit, which helped us. If it was blowing like it was yesterday, we'd be burned out right now.
How do you replace it all? How do you go through and make a list of everything that you did lose?
Within probably a matter of a half an hour, it was a pretty significant, pretty fascinating situation.
But I am thankful as hell that they're here to save my house and to save my friends' houses over here.
Your appreciation is very heartfelt.
Neighbor helps neighbor. It's always been that way, and hopefully it stays that way.
The way folks help each other out, I'm always impressed by Montana.
To the hundreds of Montanans who have donated to the MTN Wildfire Relief Fund, we say thank you. In the nearly 2 weeks since launching this effort, we've raised more than $205,000.
We'd like to say a special thank you to some of our biggest donors, the Mountain Sky Guest Ranch Fund and the Arthur M. Blank Foundation, who are matching $50,000. The Montana Shirt Company has generously given $25,000. And the Shop Cow Foundation has donated $5,000.
And to all of those who have stepped up to help this fire season, from the firefighters who put their lives on the line to evacuation shelter staffers and those who opened their homes to animals forced to flee, we here at KRTV, KXLH, and the community say thank you.
Hi, I'm Josh Eustace of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Before I was an NBA player, I was a Montanan, and I'm still proud to call Montana home. During these tough times, us Montanans, we stick together and help each other. That's why I'm asking you to support MTN's Wildfire Relief Fund and support the firefighters and the communities who have sacrificed and lost so much during this tragic fire season. Thank you.
I'm afraid our ranch is going to burn. I sure hope I don't, but it's coming.
If you weren't here, my house would have burned down.
Over the reef over there, and you could see it in the dark, you know, you could really see the flames. Because we knew the fire was coming, but we didn't know how fast.
Today the wind was blowing out of the east a little bit, which helped us. If it was blowing like it was yesterday, we'd be burned out right now.
How do you replace it all? How do you go through and make a list of everything that you did lose?
Within probably a matter of a half an hour, it was a pretty significant, pretty fascinating situation.
But I am thankful as hell that they're here to save my house and to save my friends' houses over here.
Your appreciation is very heartfelt.
Neighbor helps neighbor. It's always been that way, and hopefully it stays that way.